It's a life of extremes. Undermethylated moms generally produce undermethylated kids. It's like a genetic predisposition. Moms don't stop. They're going to get what they need to be done with their kids and make this happen and solve that problem. But it is part of the chemistry that's allowing them to push. So maybe there's an advantage to that in a way, you know, but it's not one that is comfortable. You may have some push through because maybe you can process enough to just act robotic. Stress intolerance can be so bad until you're paralyzed to function. You can become catatonic and things are so bad that you can't function, you can hardly talk, you can't even think. The person becomes very intolerant, you know, textures, light, odor, all of that becomes heightened. But not only that, sensitivities in general, emotional, absolutely. You're developing something. What is that? When there's enough of it to be developed, it could be breast cancer, it could be ovarian cancer.
And the overload can simply be the juice culture, the kale culture, the MTHFR culture.
If I had known this, I might have avoided breast cancer. If I had known what I'm about to share with you in this interview with Dr. Judy Bauman from Mental Medical, I wouldn't have thought that I was mentally ill, so anxious that I couldn't get out of bed, thinking that I was so messed up in my head and with my depression there was something wrong with my life or that I needed to end my life. This is what happens to a lot of moms. They get cancer, they go to the psychiatrist, or they feel like they don't want to live anymore, or they actually die and are no longer able to take care of their autistic child because of the things that could have been prevented nutritionally. So this is episode 2 in the series about autism mom health and mental health with Dr. Judy Bauman. We are here to save your sanity. We are here to save your child's future. We don't want you to get ill. We don't want you to get cancer or anxiety or depression that's pushing you over the edge. In this episode, you will understand what's going on biochemically in you and your child that makes you so perfectionistic and rigid and feel like you have ADHD. It's a huge misunderstanding that so many moms think they have ADHD or think they have anxiety and depression. This is a question of overload, and in this episode, we're going to talk about the role of zinc and methylation and how you can deal with that. And at the end of this podcast episode, you will learn about how you can start addressing this if you want to work with me or if you want to work with Dr. Judy Bauman. Let's go. Dr. Judy Bauman is a medical doctor and she's experienced in women's health. She founded Mental Medical in Chicago, where she combines traditional medicine with biochemical approaches to ADHD, autism, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and other biochemical imbalances.
I want you to talk a little bit about ADHD, which is huge among women, and how this is all linked, because also what I'm seeing in the moms that I am following through the turnaround process is a lot of depression, a lot of eating disorders, binge disorders, perfectionism. So can we knit a little blanket of undermethylation, zinc deficiency, and these issues?
Yeah. Key word that you mentioned is undermethylation. Methylation.
What's the rate of undermethylation in families where there are kids with autism?
Oh, we're talking about usually in the high 90s, 98, 95, 98%-ish.
Is that with ADHD families as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Symptoms that you have, let's say if you are undermethylated, you don't have enough methyl groups, things like OCD, anxiety, depression, okay?
Yeah.
Perfectionistic tendencies. Let's talk about the good things about undermethylation. They are dotting the I's and crossing the T's and make sure that everything is absolutely perfect. And they get really upset when you upset their regimen and their plan. Okay. And don't deviate. Just don't deviate from the plan, or else that's going to cause them great hardship.
Okay? OCD, anyone? Eating disorders?
That's exactly what that's
diet,
about.
Obsession, ADHD.
Get it right. Get it perfect. And when it's not, there's great upset. okay? Because you want to be perfect. These are the drivers of the work. There's nothing wrong with some of those characteristics. It helps us to move along, but there's something called, okay, that's a little too much, okay? And it's harder for you to kind of calm down. We'll get there. It's a perfectionistic sort of scenario, and it translates into some of the things that turn into be pathologic,
Yeah.
okay? And now, if you're talking autism, I'll just bring that one up a little bit. Most moms will understand this very difficult challenge in terms of deviating away from something that kid wants to do. They will keep pressing at it and pressing at it, and they become very regimented. Heaven forbid, you're driving down the street and you go a different way to school that day. Oh no, the kid's having a fit because then he knows that he or she knows this is not the route. No. And they will get very upset. Okay. And it's the undermethylation that is pushing that because they know a particular route, a particular regimen, a particular whatever, and they want to do it over and over and over. And you cannot change from that as far as they're concerned.
And
okay?
then for the women, because I think it's important to understand that we have a lot of women who are extremely obsessed with healing their children, with the diets, with the protocols, with
Yes.
being vegan, being perfect,
Mhm.
binge eating or starvation, fitness, whatever it is. Yeah.
It's a life of extremes. It
Yeah.
is. In terms of the behaviors tend to be extreme to prove a point or to get something done. Oh, heaven forbid, your house be messy and an undermethylated person is going to spend all day long and next week and not get any sleep of just cleaning it up. Every little dot that's on the floor, got to pick up that. Oh my God. It's one of those things that just does not allow that person to relax. And until it's at some point, hopefully, that they find acceptable, they will continue to push. And of course, that is an extreme. When it comes to the children, that's the other thing. Undermethylated moms generally produce undermethylated kids. Like I said, it's like a genetic predisposition.
Yeah.
In some ways, maybe there's an advantage because moms don't stop. They're going to get what they need to be done with their kids and make this happen and solve that problem. But it is part of the chemistry that's allowing them to push. Okay. So maybe there's an advantage to that in a way, but it's not one that is comfortable.
And what about the role of zinc then? Because the
okay.
approach is when you have someone with ADHD, you have a mom who's got an eating disorder, you have someone who has a severe depression,
Yes.
and all these people go to get their head fixed in,
Yes. Okay.
or they go to the head doctors. Let's not talk about psychiatry necessarily, but that doesn't really help.
There's an important thing that we do. Let's go from the basic definition of what's going on there. What is a methyl group? What is methylation? Once again, guys, just terms, not rocket science. Okay. A methyl group is a carbon with 3 hydrogens around it. And sometimes there's 4. And that would be a really stable methyl molecule because that little one that's missing is where the charge would be. So when it's not there, when a methyl group has just 3 hydrogens around it in one little area that doesn't have a hydrogen, that's an active molecule. And methyl groups, let's think of this. We all kind of know the Lego movies and about Legos and kids who love them and put them together. Well, methyl is a basic molecule that if you put them together, you can build things. Okay, they attach to each other very fine. So you can build things. So we'll call them building blocks. Yay. Okay. What else do? They also act as keys. Okay. And so when it attaches to, say, an enzyme, a hormone, a neurotransmitter, any other protein, it can turn it into its active product or it can turn it off. So, in other words, if you had a lot of high-end cars in a parking lot, they sit there unless you have a key. All right. Then you can move them to wherever the heck they're going. Oh, but that's the other thing that methyl groups do. They act as transporters of, guess what? Enzymes, hormones, proteins, and neurotransmitters. So now we've got something that can make things. It's a building block. It's a transporter, and it also acts as a key. And it does so by way of feedback mechanisms of what's needed. Okay. So if it's a neurotransmitter, then it's going to take that serotonin to its receptor site, drop it off. It depends on if you really need a a mood and demeanor that's more appropriate, turn it on. If you've got enough, it'll hold until it's time to turn it on. If there's too much and you're working correctly, it will turn it off. And so enzymes, hormones, proteins, neurotransmitter, it's a simplistic sort of look of how I'm explaining it, but basically this is what's going on with that. Okay.
Can you just clarify, because I don't think everyone will know this, when it's a biochemical issue and it's so incredibly unharmful to replenish what's lacking often. How often in our families, ADHD, autism families, and the moms, how often do we have enough zinc on board and B6 in your opinion?
We don't. We generally don't. And it's a problem. Zinc, first of all, zinc is a multitasker. It does so many things. You pull up zinc under Google or whatever, and just so much stuff is going to come out of that. It also manages your DNA. But zinc is so important. Your immune system is important. Zinc actually helps to manage that. Zinc is one of the rate limiting steps to the production of neurotransmitters. So if you can imagine, if you can't produce enough neurotransmitters, then you're not going to have the benefit of what it can do for you. So then your overall sense of well-being just goes down the toilet. It just does. You may have some push through because maybe you can process enough to just act robotic, because that's just how you're getting things done. But in terms of feelings, the overall sense of well-being, it's just not going to be there. Okay. So zinc is key. Zinc and B6 together are really the rate limiting steps for the production of neurotransmitters. And that is there to support your immune system. Okay. It's very interesting. Zinc is there for hair, skin, and nails also, because it has a role that it plays in connective tissue. You need it for that. When we're talking about mood and demeanor, once again, we're going back to its role in the production of neurotransmitters. Okay, so let's talk about that just for a second. Let's pull together a brain that functions as both an electronic organ as well as a chemical organ. Let's talk about this. Let's go back to the idea, not rocket science, you just need to understand it. Electrical conduction down a nerve, very electric, just like the stuff you plug into the wall. Copper, it's around, it needs to be there. It's helping with other minerals and metals to help produce this charge. So the waves being propagated down the nerve. Did you know that for the most part, when that happens, one nerve does not touch the other nerve, it will short out any more than you put your finger in a socket. Okay, that's not going to work. You can blow stuff up, you can short circuit, and nothing works. So what happens is we're so wonderfully made until the nerve, when the wave gets to the bottom of the nerve, there's a factory down there that says, I need to manufacture some neurotransmitter in a particular code with certain proportions so I can give this code and signal to the next nerve so it can fire and the wave can keep going down to wherever it's supposed to be. Now, here's what's interesting. You're making neurotransmitters at the end of that nerve. They've got to get transported across the sea, so to speak, to the next nerve in order to fire. Oh, did we talk about transporters that are methyl groups? Oh, so the tugboats are waiting at the end of the nerve to receive the neurotransmitters or enzymes, hormones, neurotransmitters, whatever the heck it's supposed to be, if it's a nerve, to go across the sea, okay, to the next nerve to do what? Go to a what? Receptor site that the methyl group took it over to and then decided to turn it on or turn it off to send the next wave down the next nerve. That's really how it works. And so now we have neurotransmitters being produced because there's enough zinc. Okay. Now we have transporters that are lined up to take the neurotransmitter by way of a tugboat called a methyl group to the other side. Okay. Now it's going to drop it off and wait for the feedback signal to turn it on or off based on that. And the next nerve will fire. What happens when things go wrong? Either your neurotransmitters can't be made or they're off or whatever happens that's not right, or the electronics is wrong. Okay, so you can get disarray from either two when you're talking about brain and brain functions and how you feel and all the rest of that. Okay, so you have to know what is wrong with one of those two systems in order to fix it. You do. So let's put copper. Okay, here's some examples that I think are kind of cute. People know the story of Red Riding Hood. Okay, Red Riding Hood. And the idea is to get to grandma's house. Okay, why can't she get to grandma's house? Because something's not right. The wolf, okay, is out to sabotage her visit. Well, who the heck is that? Well, the wolf or wolves act like little gang members hanging out on a corner, and they're just waiting for her, Red Riding Hood, to come down there so they can deviate that process. She was only trying to solve a math problem, but she got distracted. Okay, she was only trying to get to grandma's house, and they decided, we don't want you to because we want to eat you. Okay,
Yes.
So that didn't happen. Or if you want to use the gang member story, they're hanging out to sabotage the signal. So what does that mean? Well, she can't think right. She had misperceptions. Her diagnosis turned into something that looked like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depression, because the signals got just scattered and they went down the wrong pathway. So instead of being the wonderful, warm-hearted person that's trying to, say, raise a child, all she can think of is anger. Mm-hmm. It's not what was intended. Mm-hmm. Signals got crossed, and all she can think of to do is walk off of a building.
Okay. And with zinc playing such a role in signaling and expecting, it's a case when it comes to mood and immune system and all those things, but also when it comes to this major focus on heavy metal toxicity.
Sorry for interrupting, but isn't it wild how the whole psychiatry industry and the functional medicine industry in general, all the other guys out there, completely missed this point, that all of the symptoms that give you a diagnosis of either anxiety, depression, hyperactivity, OCD, autism actually, are also linked to something biochemical that you have in common with your child and that nobody's addressing out there, really. So if you feel like this is something I need to address, I need to know how to help my child overcome this, and I need to fix myself. That's exactly what I did in my life, and that's exactly how I created my program around building that foundation to heal yourself first so that you can be alive for your child, to protect your child and turn your child's symptoms around 10 years and 20 years from now, and you don't drown in all this perfectionism, extremes, anxiety, anger, depression, and also the risk for cancer, the risk for getting really severely ill that Judy Bauman is talking about and continues to talk about in this podcast episode. So if you want to work with me and become an expert by lived experience to turn your child's symptoms around and add on these tests and these approaches and these nutrients with Dr. Judy Bauman, I'm actually equipping you to do that inside the Autism Turnaround Program, where I have these experts training you to understand this fully. How does this work specifically for your child? What's triggering symptoms specifically for your child? But we need to build the foundation first. We need to heal you first. We need to build a healthy nervous system. We need to make sure that you sleep at night, that you can leave your home, that you are nourished, that your trauma is healed, so that you don't sabotage all the good things that Dr. Judy Bauman could do for you and with you, and all the good healing possibilities that are out there for you. The nutritional and bio-individual aspect of this is a key to turning symptoms around. It's not the only key, it's a hugely important key, and you need to be in a place where you can actually understand this and lead that journey for your child, or you will just become dependent on yet another expert and delegate this precious work that God has laid on you to turn your child's symptoms around, to lead your child through this valley by his instruction. You will just become helpless and depending on someone else if you don't do that first. So go to barefootautismwarriors.com.
people then do heavy metal detoxes
Yes.
and they get damaged for life, where the issue is in a whole different area where zinc plays a role. Could you explain a little bit about what zinc does with metal dysregulation?
Okay, yes, I can. And two things come to mind. Believe it or not, we have, once again, wonderfully made as we are, there's such a thing called metallothionein. A lot of people aren't necessarily aware of that. Metallothionein is a protein that helps you to regulate mineral and metal percentages of almost every single cell. The one that we get more interested in, if there's metallothionein 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's really metallothionein 2 that we think about when we talk about gut and brain issues. In the brain, let's just go with that one. Let me put it like this. Everybody's probably played with a battery and put a battery in a toy or a remote control or whatever the heck you have the battery for to give you something. It just so happens that most of the things that are in that battery are minerals and metals that will translate into a charge so that something works. Okay. Well, believe it or not, almost every cell in your body really has the same capacity. It's not just a thing sitting there. No, it has an amount of minerals and metals that help it to function as a living thing. Okay. And if those are off, then that little cell doesn't work as well as it could. Metallothionein says, I'm going to be the regulator of that. I'm going to help every single cell function the way that it should so it has energy. Okay. Some people don't have a lot of metallothionein, particularly the autism folks don't. Okay. And there's others of us who just don't have a little bit, but maybe not enough as we need to. So metallothionein acts as if you think about a golf ball, it has those little dents in it, those little dents all over a golf ball. Just say every little dent is particularly important for some particular mineral or metal that needs to be appropriated in every single cell you have. Okay. And so it's just going to paint a movie for you. It says brain cells. Okay, time for regulation inspection. And so it'll go to any nerve that is up there and it says knock, knock, knock on the door. Okay. Oh, too much copper in this one. Okay, on my little dent of copper thing, I'm going to take some of that and store it. Okay, now you have enough zinc. For heaven's sake, you don't have enough because it just kind of rolls around to the next little dent and says, zinc, I'm so sorry. You don't have enough. I have some extra. Let's get this out and put that out there. Okay, now you have enough zinc. Let's keep going down the list. I'm not going to go through all of the 1,000 and plus minerals and metals, but it keeps rolling around and appropriating the right amount of what needs to be there for that cell to be charged and function because it takes energy. In autism, metallothionein doesn't work very well at all. But do you know why? Part of the reason why it doesn't is because it uses zinc as fuel. Okay. So if you don't have that, you may have some situations where the cells don't have enough energy. The cells don't have enough energy, including things like mitochondria and things that give you energy and all of that. All those things can't happen. And so a lot of times in autism, that's what's going on, but it happens with other folks as well. Okay. So that's really the base of how things can get out of order. And like a battery, why is it so much that things like lithium seem to be a major player in the world of psychiatry? Well, it's one of those minerals, okay, that helps to actually stabilize the membranes in the gut and the brain so that you don't have a free for all going and coming. Lithium kind of acts like the foreman at the construction site, where if he's there, everyone gets in and out appropriately. Everything is regulated. The doors and little areas that have to open and close, the gates are appropriately working. But if you have no foreman on the job, then you have disarray and free for all. Okay. And so somewhere between lithium, natural lithium, we're not talking about necessarily the one that is highly potent in the world of psychiatry, the carbonate, talking about the natural lithium that we're all supposed to just really have, that we get out of the foodstuffs that we eat. If it's not there, we're going to have dysregulation of minerals and metals, and every cell will either work extremely poor, or if everything is lined up, then it'll work extremely well. But once again, if you don't have enough zinc, this little golf ball, metallothionein, so to speak, just sits in the corner and waits until there's enough fuel, or just doesn't work. Okay.
Wow. If you could talk a little bit about the link, because we in these autism families, ADHD families, the moms, there's a stress intolerance issue as well that's linked to
Gotcha.
pyrols. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because that's
Yeah.
also zinc and B6 related.
It's all zinc and B6 related. You got that right. And what happens with that is stress intolerance, if you want to call it that. Why is that? Well, stress intolerance can be so bad until you're paralyzed to function. Put it like that. And you can become catatonic, and things are so bad that you can't function, you can hardly talk, you can't even think. It's kind of like the experience of, I'll give you a short example. Most people have experienced this. You're so excited about something, and this might be good stress, okay, but you're so excited and you're at that birthday party and you're trying to introduce the person next to you who could be your mother or best friend, and you can't think of their name. It's kind of like, who is it? Well, it's generally a good stress, but stress in and of itself can cause you to become kind of paralyzed to function. When zinc and B6 are not around and amounts that are going to be beneficial to you, then what that really means is you're very, very stress intolerant. So any little thing, no matter what it is, it could be something like, oh, the dog is barking at me, and it just makes you the most irritable person, agitated person in the world. And the dog is just being the dog. It's just a happy dog, and the dog bothers you.
Yeah.
It just bothers you to that extent. It doesn't have to be that. Little people, 2-year-olds, are stressed out about their building blocks. Okay. They could be pyroluric. They could. And it happens actually physiologically. It may happen kind of almost naturally at certain times of life. When kids are growing very fast, when they're just, it's a growth spurt. Oh, heavens. They're using zinc just for physical growth itself. There's nothing left over for neurotransmitter regulation. So you get a quirky teenager, a very temper tantrum 2-year-old, 7-year-old, growth spurt. You could get another growth spurt at another different time in life as well. But when those things happen, okay, you become very stress intolerant. So that little kid that you see in the toy store who's kicking and screaming and just wailing, is probably in a growth spurt where neurotransmitters aren't being produced in amounts that are going to be beneficial just because of their physical growth. And you have to understand this. Your physiology really will take precedent over what's happening mentally. It's trying to keep you alive. It says, we'll work on attitude later. So that young teenage girl who is maybe just joining the ladies club, put it like that, in terms of menstrual cycles are just starting, and she's going to the mall and she's going to buy these special pair of jeans, and you're a mom and you say, no, we can have those jeans today. I don't approve of those jeans. No. To that young teenager, she's saying, my life is over.
Yeah.
I might as well kill myself.
Or the autistic children that are
exactly.
Meltdowns. Yeah.
Meltdowns like no tomorrow. And this is because of zinc deficiency for a particular reason. That might be physiologic natural growth spurt, but it doesn't matter. If you don't have enough zinc, your behaviors are going to be very similar, and everything becomes a mountain and a molehill, and sometimes paralyzes you to function.
And when it's pyrrole disorder or elevated cryptopyrroles, it has an affinity for B6 and zinc and will then deplete it in a situation where that's an issue overall.
Yeah.
Then we have an issue if someone is fasting, it's getting worse. If someone's taking fish oil, it's getting worse.
Yeah. Fasting produces pyrroles. Now, there could be good fasting. I'm not saying you can't fast and for a particular reason or purpose. The bottom line is that's intentional. And when one fasts, though, in actuality, it gives you actually a heightened sense of awareness, particularly light, odor, sound, and textures. And from a Christian standpoint, you might be truly trying to understand certain things going on from a meditation standpoint, different viewpoint. Okay. But nevertheless, pyrroles will be produced. But once you stop the fast, you got to get back to where you were. But it's light, odor, sound, and textures, are particularly with autism. Those can just be so dominant. These are the things that actually produce very much so, irritation and agitation, and people can only wear certain types of clothing. It's got to feel exactly right. The whole philosophy of, I can't stand the tag in the back of that blouse. It feels like wax paper or aluminum foil to me when it's just smooth little cotton, that kind of thing.
Light sensitivity, sound sensitivity.
Yes, wearing glasses or sound sensitivity. And on commercials on television these days, you see they put the little headphones on the child because they have something called hyperacusis, really strong sound sensitivity, which will really cause them to be so intense and distracted, and they just can't stand it.
Yeah.
Odors, you get into a perfumey situation, and that person will become very intolerant. Textures, light, odor, all of that becomes heightened. But not only that, sensitivities in general, emotional, absolutely. And so that also translates into it. So generally we use B6 and zinc and an omega-6, okay? And I need to talk about that one, like evening primrose oil, to help speed up this process of getting rid of pyrroles. Pyrroles steal B6 and zinc to a point that they will not give them back. They will not recycle that. You're going to urinate out your B6 and zinc. It's gone. It's not going to be recycled. Okay. So when you don't have pyrroles, well, yeah, you can keep what you got.
Yeah.
But when you do have pyrroles, it's going out, and then you're at a loss of what B6 and zinc can do for you. Now, we said omega-6, and a lot of folks are like, well, what about omega-3s? Omega-3s are wonderful. They are. They're anti-inflammatory. Omega-6 tends to be, I like to put it like this. It can be, there's such a thing called good inflammation, okay? Good inflammation recruits other chemicals to come into an area to clean up the mess, okay? It's kind of like the highway situation. The cops will go down the highway and are looking for any problems that might be there, and they'll help you a little bit, help you maybe even, give you some direction and give you some advice, but you need to identify if there's a real problem on the highway. You need more than the cop coming by. He needs to call the help truck, okay? Yes. And when the help truck comes, the help truck says, I have some things here that I believe can literally fix your situation. I am equipped. And in terms of omega-6, it tends to be more of the help truck that says, okay, if this looks like I need to call in some more recruits to help to clean up this inflammatory mess or whatever the heck is happening, I'm going to do so by producing certain things that signal other parts of your body that this is the site of where the problem is. And really, it just kind of accelerates the stopping of pyrrole production and extended damage, put it like that. So it kind of stops it. And so this is why we generally will suggest that omega-6s are used at least until the pyrroles are gone.
And what's the level? So the level of cryptopyrroles before we can safely say, okay, now you can do some fish oil again instead of evening primrose.
Oh yeah, let's get them back to maybe 10 or less, okay? And then maybe we can reinstate some omega-3s and maybe also some omega-6s as well, okay? And that creates a nice balance in a stabilized sort of state such that we can function again, okay? And we've seen pyrrole levels, this is important also, listen to this one. Pyrrole levels that are like over 50, and we've seen them as high as like 150, maybe even a little higher. Usually we say, okay, something else is going on with you that is part of what we're seeing, but also something else is going on with you that might be physiologic, physical, whatever. You might want to go to your primary care doc and make sure that other things are okay. Because we've caught pyrroles extremely high with certain conditions like, an autoimmune disorder you didn't know you had a brain tumor you didn't know you had a cancer you didn't know you had something going on that was beyond just little things that we look for, okay, in terms of just overall mental functioning.
And important to understand it, and you're testing for this specifically because these tests are not easy to take. The test can get damaged. It has to be cold. It has to be done in the dark. But it's important for moms to know because the pyrrole disorder is also genetic. It's the Scandinavians, the Nordic people like me, the English, the Irish genes, which there are a lot of those in the US, creating propensity for addiction, alcoholism, but also anger.
Oh, yes. Yes,
So all
yes.
these, the violence in the families, it can be something as simple as this that can be addressed with nutrients. So this is important to get out there. And
Absolutely.
something we could keep talking about, and I would love
Oh,
to, but I just
Mhm.
park that there, and then people go and see you to get that addressed for sure. So I want
Absolutely.
to jump to some questions that I've got specifically about the children. So
Okay.
now we've got the background information. We know that undermethylation is often an issue. Pyrrole disorder is often an issue. Zinc B6 deficiency, copper overload. We touched upon that. So
Mhm.
I've got a couple of questions for you about children. And one is something I see a lot, and that is eating non-foods like paper, chewing
Oh,
chewing,
okay. Yeah.
clothes, and even
Mhm.
children eating the wall. What's
Mhm.
going on?
Yeah. Well, body's kind of funny. It tends to want to try to put things in itself that it thinks it needs, and it doesn't always know where that's coming from, but it'll try. And so the condition generally called pica,
Yeah.
where some things are, this is not meant to be food or nutritious, at least as far as we can tell. These are things that kids will eat. They will chew on paper, they'll chew on a pencil, they'll sometimes they'll bite themselves. They will eat anything that is not meant to be necessarily a food stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a clear sign and a huge flag that something is definitely missing. And they're in their, whatever it is, a motivation is to try to find that thing. Okay. For instance, a lot of people, believe it or not, want to chew ice chips. Well, that's kind of
Yeah.
common sometimes among females as
And
well.
poop.
And yes, yes. And sometimes they're looking for things that are missing or they're depleted of. Sometimes it's iron, sometimes it's whatever it is. And a lot of times we don't know until we actually test and find out that, oh, there's a big depletion and blah, 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 whatever it is. And a lot of times those behaviors stop, once their body is actually satisfied physiologically.
Yeah. So depletion,
So
but it's not a good idea to just go out there. There are so many players out there who say, we'll test for your nutrient deficiencies, and then we have some supplements that you can buy afterwards. That's
of
not
course,
the way to go, right, Dr. Bauman?
no, it really isn't. What we try to do, and actually we do it, is break it down biochemically. Mineral by mineral. What is missing? What is overload? What is it that the balance here is off? And let's try to give you that biochemical individuality that fits for you. It's very rare that we have too many people with the exact same biochemistry, unless they're twins, which is interesting, identical twins. But you really must look for that individual person. In terms of autism, one kid with autism is not the other kid with autism, and it's not all the same. They are not exactly the same. They have some tendencies to have some things in common, okay?
Yeah.
But they're not exactly the same, and you can't treat them with a blanket one size fits all. Does not work. And so when people say, well, vitamins don't work, in general, they don't, because they're one size fits all. They do not necessarily fit that particular person's needs. And so it becomes important to test, use evidence-based medicine, and then appropriate what is actually needed.
That's
Vitamin B12 injections, another thing, very helpful in the autism world to provoke things like speech, language, socialization, attention and focus, all of that.
yeah.
And it
Why
actually
is
helps the
Why do some children react negatively when you do the B12 injection?
Oh, it's interesting. You have to wonder whether or not that's a true negative
Yeah.
or is the light bulb being turned on? Let me
Yeah.
tell you, sometimes the light bulb is being turned on. We've had some kids that literally have told us, this one kid is, well, I can see, yeah, I had autism. I probably had autism. I don't have it now, but let me tell you what that felt like. Okay, these are some kids that have come back and said this.
Yeah.
It felt like I was living in a world of mesh and I could only see through certain little holes. And I could not put the entire picture together. There was no processing of that. But once the veil started to widen, I started to comprehend how and what was going on. And this input was overwhelming. And I did not know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And so they get hyper, Okay, some of them get hyper. They have no idea how to manage this new information. Can you imagine what
Yeah.
that must feel like? You've
Yeah.
never seen a complete picture, and all of a sudden it's there. You go wild. And
Yes.
a lot
And
of
that's,
times that's what you're seeing.
I want moms to understand this, because sometimes when things start to work and we have
Yeah.
side effects, they panic and they stop the things that are working. So thank you for pointing that out. What about seizures and epilepsy, which is also
Yeah.
common in
Yeah.
women?
Believe it or not, there's about 30%. That's a pretty big number. Will have some level of what looks like a seizure disorder or a frank seizure disorder. Once again, let's go back to biochemistry. We talked a little bit about the brain and how it's wired, and somewhere between the neurotransmitters and the electrical conduction, when that goes off, yep, there's a seizure. And a lot of times it also has to do with other things like low glucose, hypoglycemia, drops in blood sugar provoking a seizure, low sodium. So there's a lot going on in that brain that provokes a seizure. And it is not uncommon for 30% of the autistic community to have some kind of seizure-like-ish sort of a presentation, whether it's absence seizures where you just kind of freeze and stare and just don't respond, to things like tonic-clonic movement and things like that. So it can happen. It's unfortunate, but yeah,
Is
as
it
high as
on
30.
the, is it copper? Is it issues, or is it a combination of everything and nutrients?
Of everything. You've already got a big clue that there's mineral metabolism disorder, period.
Yeah.
And we talked about metallothionein and its role and how it just will sit over in the corner and not do anything. And then the kid is at higher risk of developing a seizure disorder. Absolutely.
And
Okay.
what about the epilepsy? Is that on the same spectrum?
Same spectrum, same thing.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Perfect.
Mhm.
So growing pains and mitochondrial dysfunction, where there's also problems with fatty acid and glucose metabolism.
No, of course, absolutely. A lot of times we see a lot of our kids in the autism spectrum disorder with hypotonia, which is a little bit of a clue that there is mitochondrial dysfunction. There's not enough energy being produced, and very often things like B1, B2, riboflavin, magnesium are extremely important supports. Mitochondria. Oh, here's another big one. And we didn't talk about this. We can talk for days. Copper wrecks a mitochondria. It just goes in with a bulldozer and just disrupts it. Now, in medical school, they teach you every single cell, so every single mitochondria is supposed to produce 36 ATP. That is the powerhouse of the cell. That is your power. Okay. Well, if you've got high copper, particularly the percent-free high copper, it's like, yeah, right. We can stop that process. We're just going to go in with a bulldozer and just kind of scoop away some of those little factories in there that make energy. Well, when you have that, your muscle tone's not going to be the same. You're not going to have the same level of strength. You're not going to have enough stamina in your muscles, I say, to really look like you are, what can I say, stronger. You're hypotonic, put it like that.
Yeah.
You don't have the musculature to support what would be a better presentation. And so that's a problem, because guess what? It doesn't only stop there in terms of muscle. Your brain cells also need energy.
Yes.
Okay. So it's not just how you look. It's like, if you can't have energy up here and you don't have it and you look hypotonic looking, it's everywhere. It's a problem. And so once again, we kind of drift back to what each cell needs to function well. And energy is also a part of that everywhere.
Yeah.
Not
So
just
it is cellular level, and we're back to that whole basic foundation that we've laid so far. Well, that brings me to my final question, which is also the really interesting one that we always have to talk about, which is folate is really important for the brain. Folate deficiency. We have moms asking, okay, what about cerebral folate deficiency when we're dealing with methylation, which is also a folate intolerance condition? They do supplement with folinic acid. They see initial gains, and then it backfires and gets. What
Let's
do we
talk
do
about
about
that.
this?
Yes, it's everything isn't it's black and white. It's not. It is so not. When you're talking about folic acid, folinic acid, folate, all those derivatives of what's basically folate, put it like that. I say, okay, think about a double agent. Okay, we can talk about James Bond, we talk about some of the other people as a double agent, but there are double agents that he dealt with, okay, in terms of the spy world, okay? Folic acid, basically, no one's going to dispute this. This I have to say. The whole medical community across the globe, no one is going to dispute that taking folic acid, particularly if you're thinking about becoming pregnant and at least during early pregnancy, is so extremely important. It is, in terms of you're trying to avoid neural tube defects. Okay, we'll buy it. I absolutely stand on that one. Okay, how much folate do you need, and when do you need to kind of curb that a little bit? All right. Folic acid should be around because it helps with development of individual organs, which are probably complete for the most part by about 3 or 4 months of gestation. However, folate has a lot to do with methylation or undermethylation or overmethylation. It does. It acts, though, what people don't know is it acts as a double agent. Okay, so you can get tremendous gains with the use of folic acid, folinic acid, whatever form you want, methylfolate, whatever, for about a good 3 to maybe 6 months, depends on you as an individual. Okay, what it does, now you have to think of a cell, and then there's a nucleus, and there's the outside of the nucleus, and there's the nucleus. Okay, on the outside of the nucleus, and what you call the cytoplasm of the cell, there are organelles and all kinds of little things going on, little factories here and there. And whatever you made, maybe you made some serotonin. Okay. Well, the serotonin's like got to be picked up by the methyl group, blah, 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 blah. And folic acid will act as a methyl donor, okay, for that thing. And it'll take it where it's supposed to go. And it does a good job. And you can see some big benefit of that for about 3 months. Okay, it'll do that nicely. And there's some folks, some kids in the autistic community that are able to manage that. Everybody doesn't have a folate issue, but it tends to be a problem because 90, 95%, 98%, depends on where you are under methylated. And so a little help from folic acid in the cytoplasm of the cell may be nice and okay for a time. Now, there's also the nucleus. What the heck is happening there? Well, as folate or any form of it dives down into the nucleus, this is a problem. Because what it does, it starts to take the methyl groups off of your DNA and change your blueprint. Okay, that can be an issue. And this is why. When a cell divides, your DNA just stretches out. Well, it's efficient. It stretches out in a little line. Okay, and it says, I am ready to be duplicated so that the next cell can look just like me. Okay. And so you can say that there's a little reader that comes along and tries to make a new string of DNA for the next cell. Okay, that happens. Now, if folic acid is around an extra abundance, it tends to say, well, you know, I'm going to remove some of these methyl groups because that's just what I do. I know what I did out there in the cytoplasm, but here I'll take them off. Okay, if the gene that it's looking at is covered with a bunch of methyl groups, that usually is a signal of that might not be a good gene, because methyl groups also cover over some nasty little genes that do not need to be expressed.
Cancer, for example.
Cancer genes, oncogenes, which are cancer genes, or some other condition bad gene that happens to be a genetic predisposition. And like I said, we are so wonderfully made until this particular involvement of covering over nasty genes, okay, has happened. And so if maybe there's a nice stack there so that gene won't be exposed for 100 years, who knows, maybe never. But if you keep a lot of folic acid in a person, overload, we're talking overload because you need folic acid, but if you have overload and it keeps pulling off the methyl groups, eventually the gene is exposed.
Yeah.
And so this time when the reader comes along, oh, looky there. Oh, I've never seen you before. Okay, we'll make one. And then the next time, oh, Next, okay, what are you developing? You're developing something. What is that? When there's enough of it to be developed, it will, because that gene will influence other genes around it. And before you know it, it's developed into something. It could be breast cancer. It could be ovarian cancer. It could be, that's female stuff, but it could be any kind of anything cancer.
And the overload can simply be the juice culture, the kale culture. It can be the MTHFR culture, where there's a lot of functional medical doctors who are completely amazing in other areas saying 98% of children with autism are MTHFR. What you need to do is give methylfolate.
It's a misnomer. They're not really understanding what that really means. They're not understanding the double nature, the double agent of what's happening there. Like I said, I get away with it for a time, and then they start to catch up with you. They do. And as you know, the older we get, that's when people start developing illnesses and diseases and things like that, because, well, that DNA has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And something is going on that changes that. Like I said, we talked about things like, things we can't really do a whole lot about, like cosmic radiation and blah, 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 blah. But there's things that we can do about that in terms of how we eat and what we eat and what we're doing. Enough folate, you need it for blood vessel formation. You need it for blood parameters, red blood cells, all the rest of that stuff. Okay. But you don't need overload. And if you start to overload, then we have an issue, which is why we talk about diets and eating in moderation, and extreme of anything probably isn't quite right.
In your opinion, is it ever a good idea for autistic children to have folinic acid or folate? And is it possible to just do it with food?
It's possible to just do it with food. Now, if there's a situation where we've got a kid that, believe it or not, there's a little percentage of them out there. Like I said, we talked about the 95, let's just say, percent that are undermethylated. There's a little percentage out there, some of them that are actually overmethylated, believe it or not. So it's not only about that. And for those kids, very often they can manage folinic acid, folic acid, methylfolate with no problem.
Thank you for being so thorough, and thank you for being someone who's inspiring even reluctant physicians out there, really disrupting this whole field of science, really based on the experience that you have at Mentor Medical. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of the heart for what you've done for me personally, and for what you're doing for so many people out there.
Well, we are honored, and we really just have the most gratitude when we know our patients are doing well. We see significant improvements, and sometimes we see what we just call miraculous, amazing recoveries from things, So that's where it really comes into play. And we've enjoyed doing this now for really about 20 years or more, So, hey, thank you so much.
Now, I know you feel super clear on the fact that binge eating, OCD, anger, aggression, meltdowns, catatonic behaviors, rigidity, depression, anxiety, and autism symptoms, these are all expressions of some of the same root cause issues that you and your child are sharing. I know you're thinking, I want to fix this. Do you know what else can cause this? Or causes this? For sure. The state of your heart. Because the state of your heart and the stress levels that comes from the state of your heart, your walk with God, self, and others, affects neurotransmitters. It affects your hormonal production. It affects your immune system. It affects your neurotransmitter and transmitters and the way that the brain communicates with your glands and your cells all over the body. That is scientifically proven too. You know what else causes this? Nature deficiency. Trauma from childhood. Say you've been neglected or you have felt invisible in your childhood. That causes you to show up and do more than you can. Please people, be aggressive and anxious and feel worthless. And that causes self-sabotage, and it causes this stress, fight, and flight that ruins and wrecks the immune system, your gut health, your detoxification pathways, and your child feels that and mimics that. environmental changes and epigenetic insults in the environment and in the emotional environment can cause the same issues too. So how do you figure out what's what? That has been my journey from an autism mom with a child that had all the most severe symptoms: dimming, screaming, eloping, sleepless nights, rigidity, aggression, his dangerous behavior, violence, no language, no ability to bond with his family, to none of those symptoms and living a neurotypical independent life. I had to learn that it's never one cause or one solution. So if you want to understand whether this is a sign of nature deficiency, a sign of your heart not being in integrity in your walk with self, God, and others, if you want to know if this is epigenetic or nutritional, pyrrole disorder, methylation, B6, zinc deficiency, I had to make sure that I educate moms in understanding symptoms. It's like learning a language. You can't go to someone else and let them speak a language for you. You have to learn the language. And it took me 8 years, but I've compressed that process into a 6 to 12 months process for moms. And within my program, we have experts like Dr. Judy Bauman, autism practitioners. There are very few of them that understands what you have just learned, teaching you to become an expert in leading your child through this journey. So within my program, I turn you into that expert so that you can add on this element of figuring out these tests. But it's like step 5. It's not step 1, because you need to build the foundation of understanding yourself, understanding what God wants from you here. What's the message behind your child's symptoms? What's triggering your child's symptoms right now? Because these triggers change all the time. The nutritional needs change all the time. So if you want to understand more about this and you want links and contacts for Mentor Medical, and talk to me about your specific child, send me an email, contact@barefootautismwarriors.com. I respond to emails and I go into conversations with you and even on calls with you if that is needed to figure out what's working for your child, what's triggering your child's symptoms, and what would be a good next step. So send me an email or go to barefootautismwarriors.com/podcasts with an S /190 for this episode. Subscribe to my newsletter by downloading one of my free resources on barefootautismwarriors.com. In the next episode, you're going to learn something that will blow your mind about your self-sabotage patterns and how hidden trauma that you don't even think you have of feeling invisible is currently blocking your child's turnaround process. If you are ever procrastinating, if you are passive, if you feel paralyzed, or if you're a perfectionist or overperformer, this episode is a must for you, because that will block your turnaround process for your child, and you need to know what to do about it. See you next time. Oh, I really hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was an eye-opener for you. You know, there are so many people who are confusing you out there. And I know you want to run straight to get tests done and you want to get your supplements, you want to get started on this protocol. But just remember that you are more than a body, that every symptom has several causes. And that there are so few practitioners out there, and you have such a small window for change that it's really important that you are prepared. And it's important that you look at all aspects of healing and all the root causes for symptoms, because they are not just biochemical, they are also spiritual, they are existential, they are environmental. God has a plan here, and He's trying to wake you up. You might listen to this and feel like, I'm waking up. I'm ready to change. So if you want to learn more about how you can work with Judy Bauman, Dr. Judy Bauman and Mentor Medical, or how you can work with Judy Bauman, Mentor Medical and me and combine these things, or work with me and become an expert in methylation and pyrrole disorder and becoming a leader in this journey like I had to be by lived experience, by healing me first. Go to barefootautismwarriors.com/podcasts with an S /190 for this episode. And I will paste all the information there so that you can get started immediately and you can get into planning your next step. You can also talk to me. I answer emails, and I never work with anybody that I don't know that I can help. So that will require us going a little bit back and forth in a conversation about what's the best next step for you, what's triggering your child's symptoms, what is holding you back and slowing you down, and am I the right person to help you, or do you need to go and do testing first? So send me an email, contact@barefootautismwarriors.com. Go and find me on Facebook. Send me an email. I love to hear what you think about these episodes. And if you want to talk to me, leave me a message and I will help you and answer questions that are relevant to your child and your child's symptoms. Remember, it took me 8 years to turn my child's symptoms around, and it's taken me 20 years to get to where I'm at today, at peace, where my child is independent, driving, has his own job, is functioning like a neurotypical, and I'm free. I can look into the future and I know my child will do well. That freedom is what I'm here to try and provide for you, so that you can connect with your child, but you can also look into the future and see a child that will be doing well without you. So I hope this was useful, and I hope you listen in next time. See you then.